So I was talking about fractals in the last video in reference to Blake's style, just the situation of his text within a visual picture adds this dimension of scale, but then the pictures themselves are, characterized by these recurring patterns and swirls. Um, that seem to anticipate this mathematics that Blake had no way of anticipating, but it is modern mathematics that um, uh, demonstrates how our representation of clinical objective representation uh, of the world, our attempt to hold it fixed, hold the world objectively fixed, um, always dissolves, it falls into the closer we get in try to get more and more precise. We the object slips from our grasp and folds out into ever higher levels of scales of complexity and detail, um, accidentally, according to which um, uh, detail or accident we focus on. Um, and again, I just wanted to remind you how that, as distance as that might seem from Jane Austen, the role of accidents, the accidental overhearing, eavesdropping, accidents of, whether Lydia was found in this or that London coach. Um, uh, they're really crucial to a crucial irony, of in Austen's romance, a way in which she is acknowledging the newly complex modern world and sort of the randomness of social life, um, but also the organizing power of her art, her novel itself. Um, Her ability to contain, to acknowledge, but then also artistically contain this complexity in the form of her plots, in the form of the self consciousness of a character like Lizzie, um, uh, is uh, true to this, romanticism that I've been describing, and that is likewise correlated with this organic metaphor. The gardeners. She almost makes it into a joke. It's so sort of mystical and profound often in Blake. Although Blake it has a sardonic or kind of funny side, as we'll see too. But here she even makes it into a joke. It's almost like the gardeners, like they planted the romance. They gardened the plot of this novel. Um, and it's almost like she ends it with a little joke, even at the same time, like we the what's been gardened here, what's been cultivated, is a very deep and intense awareness of vulnerability, the jeopardy of the women face in the modern world, as well as the intensity of romantic passion and Lizzie's and Darcy's unlikely love story. Um, Fractals are also now turning back to Blake. The good thing to keep in mind when we look at Thel, um, the plot, like the fractal, uh, is delves into a deeper dimension, moves the progression that Thel goes through this journey from the cloud to the flower to the worm to the clod and then underground. It's like delving in deeper, deeper. And and ultimately, like delving into these fractals, ultimately, um, what we excavate at the deepest level when looking down underground into her own grave is a reflection of her own mind. Her senses are reflected back to her, and the self consciousness of her senses, uh, the way in which the nostril curves a bit against itself, the ear, the sexual organs, all these, this self-disruptive, uh, self-reflective activity, active creative activity underlying perception. Um, uh, is a basic theme of Thel. Um, and so I just wanted to, give it, but I'm going to focus on Blake's songs here, but just wanted to give you that little overview of Thel and just again, the character of Thel, she might be compared to Lizzie. She has this intelligence, resists complacency. All the characters she encounters, the cloud, flower, worm, clod, they're all telling her to don't worry, don't question. They're trying to resolve the doubt in her mind. Thel is, she's a female version of Hamlet. She's doubting. Her mind is raising questions about things, and these emissaries of nature are trying to stop her questioning, trying to reassure her and inviting her to dissolve into the chorus surrounding her. So she represents a kind of persistence of doubt, of questioning, until the very end, where she's sort of facing the ultimate question of her own death, and then she flees back to this nursery of the sunny phlox that from whence she started. So I just want to point out the nature, the object of her questioning. O life of this our spring, why fades the lotus of the water? So it's about time, ephemerality. Why do things come and go? She's asking about mortality and mutability, changeability of time. Why fade these children of the spring, born but to smile and fall? So uh, the impermanence. Ah, Thel is like a watery bow, rainbow, like an image of impermanence, and like fractals, an image of active perception. A rainbow isn't a stable object. Each person sees their own rainbow. It's an object that's also a reflection of your act of seeing it. It's a reflection of your perspective. Um, so she's expressing this awareness of her own activity, the elusiveness of the outside world, and of her own uh, self, of fluidity, like a parting cloud, like a reflection in a glass, like shadows in the water. This is These are the very key lines here. Like dreams of infants, like a smile on an infant's face, like the dove's voice, like transient day, like music in the air. Do you notice anything about these formulations? A smile upon an infant's face. What is that? A dove's voice. These are ambivalent, ambiguous images. Like an infant's face, the way it contorts involuntarily. Is that a smile I saw? Or, baby's first smile, baby's first words? Are they really there, or am I just imagining them? The word infant literally means without speech, um, infans. So speech, it's a expression of a pre-linguistic creature. What does it mean to attribute a smile to a creature that doesn't even know what a smile is? What does it mean to call the music of the dove a voice? He's again talking about how our perception is also a projection of our meanings, of human anthropocentric meanings. It's a creative depiction of the environment as much as a perception. Um, uh, so to hear music in the atmosphere, is like showing how we're always giving meaning to the world around us. We think it's just a random sense data, but again, like the fractal, we're organizing it according to the parameters of our own mind. So if Thel, like Hamlet, is a kind of hero of uh, critical thinking, she can't stop um, doubting and questioning. That might make you think of Descartes, who is famous for the phrase "I think, therefore I am," correlating being with thinking. Um, but Blake is also very critical of Descartes. That in a revealing way, in this kind of mockery of satire of Descartes, his poem "The Fly." This is a great poem to start with, I think, Intro to Blake, because it's so multidimensional and clever. The Fly. Um, so this is about, and it's about an accident. So it may it's about the experience we've all had of inadvertently or thoughtlessly, as Blake said, slapping and killing a fly. What's at stake in that? Um, Again, seemingly marginal, totally insignificant event. He's focusing attention on. Little fly, thy summer's play my thoughtless hand is brushed away. Am not I a fly like thee, or art not thou a man like me? For I dance and drink and sing till some blind hand shall brush my wing. If thought is life and strength and breath, and want of thought is death, then am I a happy fly if I live or if I die. So the poem concludes with it begins with this sensuous sort of accidental, event. I've noted I thoughtlessly slapped a fly, um, and it ends by saying, "I'm happy whether dead or alive. It doesn't matter." Um, he's talked himself out of caring about life altogether. Um, uh, and so instead of the an assertion of thought, like Thel is paying attention to details of the world, the dove's voice, the infant smile, um, that her questioning is responding, is paying attention. It's experimental. Um, it's experimental in that it's noticing accidents, and the questions are responding to these details of exploratory experience. Um, he, Blake's exploration of the Cartesian, I think, therefore I am, thought is life, want of thought is death. He shows that this Cartesian thinking makes actual sensuous experience irrelevant. Even my own hand, my thoughtless hand, has become alien to me. If I am my thoughtless hand, um, he's turned myself, my actual embodied self, into a kind of zombie. Um, so, remarkable for this little child's poem. It turns actually quite horrific, in its if you think it through. Although at the same time it's quite funny. I mean, there's a jokey aspect to it, especially when you reflect on the painting and the other version of the meaning of the title, the fly, thy summer's play. That's he correlates with badminton rather than the actual fly. So the life and death drama that is addressed in the poem is hidden in this children's lyric, in this depiction of human play, human sport, Um, and so again, he's troubling our sense of like what's serious and what's not. The life and death, these um, key human values are at stake everywhere. Infinity in a grain of sand. Like the Fly, the poems The Tiger and The Little Black Boy also explore how ideologies, so the ideology of thinking in The Fly, uh, who what it means to live is just to think, that is a paradigmatic ideology that reduces the reality of life, to what we understand, what we can simply cogitate and think mentally. Um, the Tiger and the Little Black Boy likewise show how modern ideologies um, of industrial power and manufacturing, sort of technological causality. In the case of the tiger, all the imagery of industrial production, the furnace, the anvil, the chain, the hammer, um, uh, involve an ideology of power, of tyrannical power, of coercive power. So that the question of this natural perception of the tiger's symmetry, the symmetry of the tiger's stripes around its face, um, becomes terrifying, because just the thought of the creator um, becomes terrifying in a context of industrialism, where creative power um, is, is correlated with this violent coercive power of factory production, where, like as in Dickens, the factory machinery is dehumanizing. Um, uh, and likewise in Little Black Boy, the ideology of race, um, it is deadening, and creates the Little Black Boy is about how the ideology of race is um, internalized. It is sort of internalized racism, a persistent correlation of whiteness with purity and goodness. Um, the, the poem spoken from the perspective of the little black boy, he can't escape um, the racist thinking. Um, uh, so even as he's reassured by his mother that his soul is white, that he remains caught in that racist ideology. And so at the end of the poem, he thinks he's talked himself out of the denigration of uh, associated with blackness. Um, but nonetheless, he's still left waiting to be loved by God and the white boy. Um, uh, so even his dream of transcending race is articulated in implicitly racist terms. So again, in these three examples, the Fly, the Tiger, and the Little Black Boy, we see how modern ideologies of uh, uh, thinking as truth and reality, industrialism as power, creative power, and racism um, distort our perception um, in different, very different, diverse, compelling ways. This is heartbreaking. The spectacle of a child, heartbreakingly, believable. He's inhabiting a child's mind, understanding race and trying to think itself out of race at the same time, and thereby retrapping itself in racist ideology. Um, the tiger, like the fly, has a kind of funny aspect to it too. The interplay with the imagery, because the symmetry that's described in the poem, that's as so haunting and terrifying expression of the coercive power. Who would dare exercise such power? um, it it isn't even depicted in the painting. It's the painting gives us the tiger in profile. So the painting, like sort of like in the fly, is at odds with what's depicted in the poem, and shows the poem as a distortion of outside reality. Um, the human abstract in London likewise interrogate modern ideologies um, that of compassion. Um, Pity would be no more if we did not make somebody poor. If we, so we celebrate pity, we valorize pity, compassion, and charity. That's these are key bourgeois values, to care about the poor. But Blake again turns the tables and suggests, well, don't and then in a sense we need poor people in order to be the kind of charitable, compassionate people that we say it's important to be. So in a way, we need to keep creating poor people in order that we can feel sorry for them. Um, we couldn't be these virtuous, compassionate people if we didn't have poor people to feel sorry for. So he is again showing how the implicit ideologies that structure what we think is the given, naturally given world, or the unstructured reality as we find it. Blake is exposing how it's actually the underlying creative forces that we disguise to ourselves. His poems are about deconstructing the what we take for granted, and opening up again the doors of perception, and making us aware of what might be otherwise. We have the creative power to think and do differently. Um, so these are sort of the examples of ideologically critical poems, ways in which he's exposing ideologies. I the mind forged manacles, like this net growing out of the man's head in the human abstract, the way in which we abstract the world, make ourselves abstract, by making the world conform to the traps of our own minds. Um, so, um, a couple other poems, The Sick Rose and The Clod and the Pebble, work in a little bit different way, more positively, I think, opening the doors of perception by building on rather than um, showing building on nature, natural perceptions, the complexity of nature, rather than simply showing the destructive, imprisoning effects of mental categories or ideologies. Um, the Sick Rose is one of my favorite poems. This and the image, these personified. So it's about an infected rose with the worm is kind of personified here in vague or not so vaguely sexual ways, interrogating this image of love, this very conventional symbol of love, and questioning whether it disguises sickness. Um, and whether this so again making us um, uh, question what we take for granted as beautiful and good, whether this image of wholesomeness, desire, and joy might disguise just the opposite, disease, but then at the same time asking, could the disease also disguise what we perceive as disease, not have a love, joy, a beauty of its own dark secret love. So why is the disease? What's this sort of like racism? Why do we? What constitutes health and what constitutes disease? How do we draw that distinction? Actually, why is one white and the other dark? Or why is one wholesomely rosy and the other not? So he's again to opening up a different, opening the doors of perception and making us recognize and contemplate a more complex, more interactive web of ecological reality. The Clod and the Pebble again interrogates the ideological lens or mind forged manacles through which we perceive the world, the ideologies that frame our perception. So in this case, he juxtaposes an ideology of Christian charity, love, compassion. He's questioning that like he did in the human abstract. And the opposite, sort of and what isn't compassionate, that's selfish, and materialistic, and sinful, sort of like wholesomeness and disease. But he correlates these two attitudes with natural sounds that he hears in the environment. So he quotes first the ideology he hears in the Clod of Clay, the Christian selfless love is he attributes to the sound of a clod of clay. And then the selfish attitude he hears in the sound of a warbling brook. Um, so sung a little clod of clay trodden with a cattle's feet, but a pebble of the brook warbled out these meters meet. Um, so what's cool about this, I think these two uh, sounds. So he's making us think about these sounds. Um, what is a clod of clay? What's that sound? Trodden by cattle's feet. Um, it's a sound of sacrifice. So it's dissolved, self dissolution. Is that a song? Like, it not like the pebble of the brook makes a proper song. It warbles out these meters meet. Um, uh, and uh, you see, so the selfishness is correlated with the hardness of the pebble, and the selflessness, the self-sacrificing attitude is correlated with the self-dissolution of the uh, clod of clay. Um, uh, these images are complex and um, don't they undermine the interpretation that the ideology would limit them to. Um, so for instance, the pebble, although it's an image of hard, self-contained selfishness, um, it makes the environment around it sing. So it even if we interpret the sound in terms of this ideology of selfishness, sinful self-absorption, um, it isn't actually true because the it's resonating in the world around it. It's not. This sound is not, in fact, as selfish as the interpretation um, with uh, implies. Um, so here, what I want to suggest that, what I was already suggesting about the paintings is how Blake is showing how sensuous experience has a complexity and detail that exceeds the limits of the mind forged manacles of our ideological interpretations. And so rather than being dumb or just inert empirical sense data, what we hear has a complexity to it that has a lot to teach us.